Hello. Oh, yes. Say hello. Hello, everybody. Unfortunately, the plague hit me, so please excuse my voice. Also, I did just get some pretty devastating news about my cat. Send some good vibes because I don't really know what's gonna happen next. So I've been spending a lot of time with him and crying a lot today. Things are a little rough right now here, but I really wanted to talk about this episode because Dead by Daylight is a game that I've put a lot of hours into, a little over 2,800, which is crazy. Don't judge me. And as a Twitch streamer who primarily focuses on this game, I had a lot of interest and stake in this episode, and I really wanted to talk about it. So let's talk about the Dead by Daylight challenge in Boulay Brothers' Dragula. There were a lot of really fun references throughout the entire episode, including death is not an escape, calling the contestants survivors, etc. I do wonder if BHVR didn't release all of their IPs to the Boulay Brothers because there were a lot of things referenced, but not quite correctly. And so I want to give a hand wave pass that maybe that was just a copyright thing, that they were not given full access to utilize every one of the resources that were available to them, or if it was just a creative decision that the Boulays made, and me being a little Dead by Daylight stickler hoe, there were some things that I was like, oh, that's kind of incorrect. But I wasn't totally upset at it. One of those things being haste and bloodlust that were categorized almost as if it were like an Overwatch stat or just a generic video game stat when it showed the monsters. And some of those numbers and the way that they were presented was incorrect, but that's me being a little stickler. I'm still pretty gagged that Pi was eliminated. I was sure that it was going to be Auntie, considering that Pi has a better track record, and I thought that maybe that would come into play here. It didn't, and that's fine. I also want to say I'm really bothered by this whole conversation with Yuri getting a win so late in the game and how you shouldn't go to Dragula to find yourself, etc. A competition is really difficult, and there's going to be different parameters that you might not be able to mentally get ready for before you get there. Like, yeah, you'll have an idea of what the challenges are going to be. You have an idea of what the environment's going to be, especially someone like Yuri who's come from Drag Race already. Having an idea of what competition is going to feel like in a camera televised setting. But expectations are going to be different, expectations are going to shift, and sometimes you have to adjust your drag to what the judges are looking for, you have to adjust your energy for what the television is looking for, etc. And so just because some people are able to pick up on that energy a little bit quicker doesn't mean that someone like Yuri is doing a bad job at that. So I inherently disagreed with this whole conversation and topic, especially as it was getting towards the end of the episode, because in my opinion, Yuri ate this episode down and deserved the win, in my opinion. And this is just coming from me being an active fan of the game. I know that Matthew Cody was there, and I know that he is the creator of this game, but BHVR's biggest problem is that they don't know what is happening in their fan base, making really bold, brash statements online about the state of the game and the state of killers, the state of survivors that everybody universally disagrees on, and we all wonder, do they play their own game or do they just own it? Some of the decisions and deliberating was a little bit interesting to me. The actual category of the challenge was for a made-up category in the Dead by Daylight sphere, and that was myths and cryptids. And there was some Abora shade in the initial Boulay message, which I absolutely loved. And they also need to create a signature kill move, which is a Mori in the Dead by Daylight universe. The fright feat was utterly disgusting. They had to stick their hands in this glass container and grab a Dead by Daylight game cartridge while trying not to disturb the tarantulas, and the secondhand ick and fear this gave me was so palpable. I felt my body tense up until the challenge was over, but I could not look away from it. I also felt like the creatives were really quick. They moved by faster than any other part of this episode. I loved what the Boulays were wearing. Their prosthetics were so cool, and if anyone clocked it, their look was actually spoiled last week in the thumbnail. Someone at Shudder got those thumbnails swapped because the thumbnail for this week was last week, and last week's thumbnail was this week. Someone is getting fired at Shudder. Nyahuru is back and looked so good. Loved this Medusa look. So let's talk about the look, shall we? Auntie is first out, and my first thought was that it looked a little bit flat. I think the idea of this is cool. The only killer that I could see this on would be Dragula. Dragula is an IP that was acquired from Castlevania, so this is not really something that could be used for any of the killers. And I'm assuming that they all got a list of killers that they could apply their cosmetic to that would be applicable in game. And there's no one that I could see that would even be able to wear this, if I'm being completely honest. The staff I could see maybe Blight having, but the body shape does not work for Blight. The scales lacked a lot of dimension, and I thought the wings looked a little too matte for the category. It just didn't look filthy enough, and it didn't look horror enough. I like the idea of it, it wasn't big. And to be honest, I thought the Mori was a little bit silly looking. Next out is Asia Consent. So I have a couple different things that I want to say about this. First off, I think this could easily be used in a Huntress cosmetic. It looks like something that the Huntress would wear. It's got the right design, it's got the right shape, it's not an axe, but I could easily see this being something that Huntress could have. I think the overall design of it is cool for Dragula. I am not anybody that cares about body at all. I think it's great to show body, but this skin is a little salacious for Dead by Daylight. The characters that are undressed in Dead by Daylight, the men, usually have a jacket on or a big piece of ugly jewelry to cover up some of the shirtlessness. They try really hard to not include anything that has this much skin showing. With a lot of the femme characters that they've got, even ones that are on the monstrous side that are not wearing clothes, they try really hard to cover up the body with gore and filth to make it not look so much like femme nudity. So I was actually super surprised that this look won because there's so much body showing and it feels kind of uncharacteristic for something like Dead by Daylight to award a win in this look. So I'm assuming that the final look is going to be really altered to not include this much flesh because it does seem out of character for them. The other thing that was a little surprising and concerning to me is the lore and mythology behind this. Asia says that this is based off of lore that Native people have specifically asked again and again and again in many different contexts to stop referencing this creature. And Dead by Daylight's community tends to be a little more socially aware. So there was a character that came out recently called the Unknown, and the mythology made it seem like it was going to be this Native American lore. And people were in uprised, threatening to ban the game, threatening to uninstall if it was. And Dead by Daylight had to issue some clarity that this was not a part of that lore. If you're unaware, you can Google. Google's free. This conversation also came out with Until Dawn and the use of that. This is a piece of lore that is very important to Native people to be shared appropriately and through that lens. I don't know Asia's background, if she is a part of this tribe that has the permission to share this. And normally in these types of scenarios, I'm of two minds. One, we can't accommodate every single thing in the world because then we're just going to be tailoring our 100% of our speech to make people not feel uncomfortable. However, when it comes to a culture that has been appropriated again and again and again and has been systemically abused and targeted by the United States, if they ask us, hey, please don't participate in this part of our lore and mythology because that is not for you to participate in, I'm going to err on the side of those Native people who have been taken advantage of throughout history and respect those wishes. So I can't expect everybody in the world to be educated about this. Perhaps Asia didn't know, perhaps the Boulets didn't know, perhaps somebody on the production team didn't know, but Matthew Code in particular has already dealt with this particular problem and should have known ahead of time this might not be the thing to reward because it's going to create backlash. So while I think the look is cool and while I think the idea of it is interesting, it's a touchy subject that I just don't think should be tickled. And for me personally, I would have looked at all of those cultural contextual things and I would have maybe said, this is a great look, but it's not one that we're going to include because of these sensitivity things we want to move forward with. Again, maybe Asia is a part of this culture and I just don't know, but that would have been nice to have been shared ahead of time because people's culture is not meant to be a costume, especially something that is meant to be not talked about. And again, if you're confused and you're concerned, you don't understand why this is an issue, Google is free. Please look up if it is okay to talk about these things and make your own decision. Next out was my winner, and this belongs to Yuri. I love this look because I could totally see it in Dead by Daylight. The scale of the gown with the bloody mermaid ruffle and the gigantic claws, I could see this on one of two killers. I could either see this cosmetic on the artist or on the hag. Specifically, I think I could see it more on artist because hag already has a cosmetic that looks like this. They did something recently where they did a Creature from the Black Lagoon inspired look for the hag. So this is already something that she kind of already has. I could totally see this being on artist, and if you were to split the hands off and just have the runny ink that artist has on all of her cosmetics, this could easily work for her. Plus the scraggly hair looks very artist coded to me. I enjoyed this shiny crushed velvet. I think it adds dimension and scale to the look. I think it makes it look scary. I really like the aquatic spikes in the back. It looks monstrous. And she said that this was based off of a mud mermaid. I don't know really anything about New Zealand cryptids, if they even have anything. I personally think it would have been maybe more interesting if she had pulled something from her own culture to maybe draw inspo from for this cryptid look, because every region has a cryptid. I'm sure that there are some down under. I did find it interesting that Yuri was the only one asked about her cryptid and where she drew inspo from and why she ended up choosing that. Maybe everybody else was asked, but Yuri's was the only one that got shown to us in the final edit, which makes me feel like they included that to make it stick that she was up for elimination and eventually went home. On one hand, I understand that, and I think it's important to help us as the viewers understand why somebody went home. But because this look was perfectly in theme, it made no sense why Yuri went home or was even up for elimination at all. This should have been the winner in my opinion, and getting wins at the end of the competition means nothing to me. And most everyone I've talked to about this also is in agreement that it doesn't matter that Yuri got wins so late in the game. Finally, we have what appears to be Goatman done by Gray. I love this look. I think it's super fun. I love that Gray incorporated his signature gray matter look onto the staff. I could only see the Trapper wearing this cosmetic, and obviously the scale would need to be brought up a little bit because Trapper is kind of a beefier dude. I could maybe see this on Wraith, but considering that Trapper already has a Krampus skin that looks exactly like this, I very much doubt they would give a second goat-like look to Trapper. I imagine they would probably split the difference and add that to another killer, potentially Wraith. I don't really see anybody else using this look, and the staff element doesn't really work for Trapper, considering that he's got a machete. I could also maybe see Blight having that cosmetic as well. The Boulets also mentioned that there was going to be no Last Supper as punishment for fans being so disgusting and rude towards their monsters in years past. And they also mentioned on their podcast that because of last year, the ghouls were so quiet and it was like pulling teeth to get them to talk about anything. They all wanted to be kumbaya and happy, and we're not going to upset anybody with our opinions, that the Boulets are no longer doing them, or at least until further notice. So I'm curious if they might bring that back next year. They did mention a couple of weeks ago that there is going to be something dropping that is going to resolve the Aurora situation. I'm really curious if they're gonna do some type of resurrection or some type of quasi-reunion that maybe is aired much later to avoid some of the backlash. Either way, I'm really curious what's gonna happen next for the Boulets and their plans to bridge the audience with production. And the extermination challenge is to go through a warehouse while being pelted by paintballs and have to collect little coffins that have blood points in them. This was an interesting way of tackling the extermination and trying its best to emulate Dead by Daylight. What I think would have made it more fun would have been if all the eliminated monsters had been the ones with the paintball guns. I think that would have been a much more satisfying route to see these people that had all died along the way to them being there and then trying to get them out of the competition. There would have been more stakes, I think, and it would have been fun to watch. So we find out that our eliminated ghoul, unfortunately, is Yuri, who had one of my favorite exterminations, getting to go back de-drag, do the lipstick fake out as if they were on Drag Race and saying, oops, wrong show, leaving, getting their flowers, getting in the van, going to the airport, and then blowing up. It was such a fun extermination. This season's had some of my favorites, with Aurora, as well as Jaharia, and now Yuri. These are gonna live in my brain as favorite exterminations up until now. So let's discuss the top 3, because in my opinion, I think it's between Asia and Gray only. I think with Auntie having so many bottom placements, I think we're in a situation where I don't see them justifiably winning. And considering that their drag hasn't evolved and changed that much outside of what we've already seen, I just don't see them pulling out something that's gonna be so grandiose that it'll justify crowning them. Asia's done really well all competition, but there have been some moments where I just think, you look like you don't really want to do this challenge, so you kind of phoned it in. Whereas Gray every single week has been turning out interesting, innovative, different looks and always incorporating their signature stamp. So for me, I feel like Gray is the hands down winner. It's really gonna come down to what they all do for horror, filth, glamour. Oh, it's my buddy. I gotta move because you're making my foot fall asleep. Here you go, you can sit down now. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what's gonna happen next week. But I'm fully predicting Gray's gonna win. I think it is pretty strong case for Asia, but I'm suspecting that Gray is gonna pull out something even more interesting than we've seen from them thus far. And I totally can't wait to see what that final package is gonna look like. In my opinion, I don't think this was Yuri's week to go. I do think this was Auntie's, but that is just my personal opinion. I think Auntie's great at drag. I just haven't seen as much from them as I was really hoping I was going to. And I've come a long way from week 1 thinking that they were going to win, but we'll see what happens. What were your thoughts on this episode? Let me know in the comments below. And please check out some of my other socials. I am pretty active on Blue Sky right now. As always, I will see y'all on the flip.